I wanna feel that way.
Thank you so much for having me, Kenyon. Okay, I've got some questions here that I would love to answer. Um, the first one from Sarah, a ceramics major, freshman here at Kenyon College, says, "Would you say what would who would you say were your major influences in regards to your singing slash vocals as George Clanton?" So when I perform as George Clinton, sometimes I sing. Often I sing. And who are my influences? Well, um, in the in the olden days, I didn't think that I was able to sing. And what really gave me the confidence was I found out kind of through doing karaoke that I could do a really good impression of the guy that sings the song "Don't You Want Me, Baby." It's a popular '80s song. It's like "Don't you want me, baby." That was a number one hit song by the Human League, and I found out that I sing this pretty good. And then I started with this kind of very '80s affect, um, where you sing all theatrical and whatnot. And I found out that dipping into that character gave me a lot of confidence in my singing that I didn't have before. And I realized, well, I've got actually, it could use some work, but a pretty strong voice. And I guess over the years, a little bit of that '80s affect kind of faded away as I've kind of found what elements of my own voice um, were in there. But I would say, you know, it was really the Human League was a huge influence in just '80s music in general. But now I don't think of it so much, and I just kind of try to sound natural. But all of that is just kind of like subconsciously ingrained in your mind at a certain point, and you don't really notice who your influences are anymore. You're just picking and choosing little things that you hear. Great question. And another question from Michaela, a geometry major. I didn't even know that you could major in geometry. A junior here at Kenyon College says, one thing that is fascinating about your music is that even though it draws from your memories of growing up, there is a nostalgia factor that can be tapped into by people younger than yourself, younger than me. What pieces of media have you drawn from informing your aesthetic for George Clanton and ESPRIT, and why might you think they can be appreciated by so many different people? Well, thank you, Michaela. That's an excellent question. One thing that is fascinating about your music, I'm pulling from, is another influences style question. Pieces of media to form my aesthetic. It's difficult to know much what my aesthetic is. I definitely, jump around a lot. Um, I really like kind of late '90s. Right now, I'm really into like this kind of late '90s, early 2000s kind of future utopian sort of Y2K aesthetic. Um, and I'm kind of exploring, I guess, how 3D art was rendered at that time and utilizing it for myself. Um, I also, you know, my George Clanton Slide album cover was bigly influenced by just kind of like '90s magazine advertisements, particularly Skechers, which I'm wearing on the cover, the Skechers shoe. And before that, I've dabbled in different sort of like '90s CGI and maybe, I don't think so much '80s stuff, but I'm sure it's there. Um, Particularly maybe some of like um, the funny faces that I pull, like that's kind of influenced by funny, what we perceive as funny '80s album covers today. I guess they thought that they looked cool then. It's really impossible to know. Um, But yeah, so I collect. I've been collecting some video equipment from the early 2000s, late 90s, which is what you're seeing here today. And can that be appreciated by a bunch of people? Well, I don't know. Thank you for saying that it is. I think if somebody doesn't have any distinct memory of that, I don't think that it's necessarily kind of, um, even tapping on nostalgia for me all of the time. Sometimes we take those old things and kind of twist them into something new that doesn't really remind me of anything. But I think it's cool that there are these kind of abandoned aesthetics that were obviously just inherently cool at some other point in time, and to be able to kind of dig for those and find these abandoned aesthetics, it's like, well, here I can come up with and present something that's new and fresh to people, but I don't actually have to be creative enough to come up with something new and fresh myself. I can just kind of go back into something that people abandoned because it got played out so much, like with these Y2K aesthetics. Like eventually that looked played out, but now you haven't seen it for 20 odd years. So it's fresh again because in many cases, you've never seen anything that looks like this. Even if it was the year 2000, it would just blend in and you wouldn't even notice it. Like I was just talking to a friend about how, wow, look how cool this album cover looks. I remember when I was a kid, all album covers looked like this, and it was just like in one eye out the other. It didn't matter. You didn't really even think about these cool like 3D graphics. Now they kind of look cool. It's kind of otherworldly, to kind of purposely put a limit on the quality of something that you can do because you're trying to replicate the look of a time period. Excuse me for my long answer. I hope that you'll forgive me. Who are some emerging artists that you really love? Well, you know what? I kind of discover a lot of artists from doing this weekly live stream that I've been forcing myself to do for the past 30 some weeks, and kind of listening to what people who are watching the live stream are suggesting and bringing some of those people on the show. I think that there's this band called Magdalena Bay that's really cool. I just met them this week, and so I've been listening to them a lot. There are some really cool emerging artists in the Vaporwave scene, and some that aren't so cool. I tend to kind of broaden my net to kind of find things that I think are particularly interesting, and I'm going to have to give a shout out to my friend Adam Kane right now, who is really just emerging out of nowhere, with not a lot of musical history that people can listen to, and he is just absolutely killing it right now. So check out Adam Kane. Most of the people that I become exposed to are people who I work with. As far as emerging artists, I don't really do a lot of digging. A lot of the artists that I listen to are already established, and I'm typically late to the game when it comes to them. Like, I'm really into Caroline Polachek right now, but it took me like almost a year to kind of come around and give that album a listen. And for that matter, that's just something that happens in my life all the time. Like, I think it took me 2 years to listen to the Tame Impala Currents album, and then that was my favorite album of the year, but nobody wanted to talk to me about it because it was already played out by the time I heard it. So sorry I don't have a better answer for you. Who are some artists in your eyes that are wildly underrated / underappreciated? Interesting. I wonder if I'm going to edit this after the fact so I can think about it a little bit longer. Wildly underrated artists. Okay, again, I'm going to have to kind of circle back to some people that I work with here, and they're the ones who are really coming to mind. There's a band called Death's Dynamic Shroud, who I think is kind of will be in the future kind of rated on this level of like the Aphex Twins of the world, or the the Boards of Canada of the world, or these kind of like mysterious electronic acts that people put a lot of value on, that people just kind of worship. And I think that in that sense they're kind of undiscovered. People who follow Vaporwave know who they are, but people aren't really like listening to Death Dynamic Shroud yet. And I hope that I can do everything that I can in my power to kind of switch that up. There's another really cool kind of ethereal, kind of like drum and bass artist named Aural Imbalance, that it's kind of like, it doesn't seem like really anybody is listening to that. But I listen to them all the time and just put them on and can listen to their entire discography. That's one to check out. And another friend of mine who I think is criminally underrated is Equip. Equip is an artist out of Chicago who makes music that's kind of influenced by video games, like early 90s video games. And I think what they're doing is really interesting and kind of unparalleled in music, period. I think it's a really unique and distinctly identifiable style, that it seems like everybody who comes upon it loves it, but hasn't really found the audience yet, I think, because, it's weird. It's weird to like base your whole music off of this like one singular aesthetic, but he's really mastered it and makes some truly incredible music. You have said, okay, here we go. You have said that, question number 5, you said that your musical process as George Clanton is mostly you experimenting until you find something you enjoy based on your lack of formal training. Do you find this to be more or less the same with ESPRIT, or is your process different? You know what? The real answer there is that the George Clanton and ESPRIT processes are almost identical. I mean, in fact, they're identical to the point where I don't set out to make a George Clanton or ESPRIT song. It's just kind of, how does the song end? And what does it lend itself to as far as a live performance? Do I have a song here that kind of has a chanty hook that I can sing and a room full of people are going to want to sing along? Or is this kind of more of something that I can loop and really get in a trance by, and, put the delays on and really just kind of meditate and feel psychedelic too, kind of a transportative song. And then those end up on the ESPRIT lineup. But the beginnings, they're identical. I don't set out to make any different. I don't set out to make anything. It just happens on accident. And then if it sounds like if it's going to be a George Clanton song, it goes over here. If it's ESPRIT, it goes over here. And, to be honest, I'm kind of always kind of blurring those lines. And we might kind of find like a hybrid George Clanton ESPRIT album on the next album that kind of blends both of those things. But generally, that's how it has been done up to this point. And I'm developing music for George Clanton and ESPRIT at the same time, and just kind of leapfrog each other every other year. Question number 6. One project of yours is that I love. Oh, thank you. Is your collaboration with Nick Hexum of 311. How did this collaboration come to be? Do you foresee yourself continuing that project in the future? And who are some other artists you would like to work with if given the opportunity? Well, I'm glad that you love that album with 311. It came to be because I love 311, and I was talking about them on basically any opportunity that I was given. I would talk about 311 and how much I liked them. I think that I got a little bit of a kick out of people being like, "Oh, 311, that's got nothing in common with your music. I've never really checked them out. I only really like that. I know that one song." But it's funny. I mean, 311 is huge, to the people who know 311, and they don't really know who I am. So anyway, long story short, some of the people on the 311 team are George Clanton fans, and they put the music in front of SA and Peanut, and they were listening to it, and then Nick Hexum was like, "What is this?" And they were like, "Oh, I don't know. This is just George Clanton guy." And Nick Hexum actually got first listened to the ESPRIT album 200% Electronica. And that's what he liked. And I met him backstage because his people got me backstage tickets and says, "Hey, anytime you want to come out." And I didn't know that it was going to be anything. I was just going to get a free ticket to 311. So I went, I watched them backstage. I got some free beers. And then at the end, I met Nick Hexum. We took a photo. He said, "Hey, if you ever want somebody to play guitar on your song, let me know." And I thought that he was just being sweet, but it turns out he was being serious. And I sent him a song, and he sent me back a guitar part and a singing part. I thought it was amazing. And we went on to just replicate that 8 or 9 more times to make the album. And do I see myself continuing that project in the future? Well, I feel like that project, there is a lot of material to digest, and I think that I'm going to back away, from it for now, and work on the new solo George Clanton album. But I could see him, asking him to feature on the new solo George Clanton album, or doing another song again. I think it would be cool to have an opportunity to remix a new 311 song. But we'll see how that goes. And who are some other artists that you would love to work with? Well, I always really, really wanted to work with Keith Flint from The Prodigy. He is sort of recently deceased. Rest in peace, Keith Flint. He's the guy who sings "I'm a Fire Starter, Twisted Fire Starter." I always wanted to work with him. And another one who's extremely high on my list is Seal, the guy who sings "Kiss from a Rose." And I don't know what it is. I guess I have these childhood fantasies about making music with my favorite artists from when I was a kid. There are some, modern artists that I would really like to work with. Gene Dawson, I'd love to work with. I think that he is it's kind of too late to say that he's underrated because I think he's popping off right now. Let's see. Any plans to continue the 100% Electronicon in the future? Yes. 100% Electronicon is meant to be a yearly event. We just got screwed out of it this year because of coronavirus, but I want to do it every year, basically until I'm dead or people stop coming. So I look forward to doing 100% Electronicon, which, if you don't know, is a festival for me and other similar artists that I created last year, and it was a big hit. And yes, I want to do it again next year. Thank you for that question, and the year after that, and the year after that one too. Question number 8: You've been releasing music for well over 12 years. That's true. Do you feel that you have, quote, found your sound, or is it constantly changing and developing? Yes, and double yes. I do feel like I found my sound, as opposed to sort of, I feel like this is something pretty much all musicians do, is early on in their career, they seek out specific things to kind of emulate. And I think that that's a learning process that everybody has to go through. As you say, "Oh, I want to make this song that sounds exactly like this," and then you try to figure out how it was done, and you don't really have maybe a totally unique thing of your own. And nothing is ever totally unique, no matter how pretentious somebody is. And they'll tell you that they don't have any influences. But at this point, I feel like instead of consciously pulling from my influences, it's just kind of all in my mind. And now, instead of trying to say, oh, I want to make a blend of, the Prodigy and the Happy Mondays and the Laws and Smashing Pumpkins and Primal Scream, and mixing all of these things together, I say, I'm just going to make a George Clanton song today, and I know what that's going to sound like. So in that way, I have found my sound, but that doesn't mean that it's not changing and developing, because now that I'm kind of on this George Clanton road, that I'm always kind of tweaking things. And I guess it just depends on, do you think that the album 100% Electronica and Slide sound the same, or that Slide and the new Nick Hexum album sounds the same? And if the answer is no, then yes, it is constantly changing and developing. But at the same time, I also feel like I kind of found my sound. And if you listen to those songs and you don't have a vocal to go off of, and you had never heard them before, I think you'd go, oh yeah, that sounds like a George Clanton song. And I think that that's going to be true for my future output. But I hope that it will have progressed and developed and be a little bit fresh, because it's easy to go backwards and just keep creating the same song. Even if that's maybe what people want from me, it's just more fun to try to challenge yourself and find something new, which is the whole reason that I guess you get into this kind of art, is for self-fulfillment. Any new projects in the works? Question number 9. Yeah, I am working on a new album. It's about halfway done. I really, really, really love it. It's coming along slow, though, because I'm working on all other different types of projects. Right now, I'm working on some virtual reality projects. I'm developing a virtual reality concert series called Virtual Utopia. That's virtualutopia.org, where you can, we're actually taking some of the money that I make from my 100% Electronica record label and putting it into paying up and coming sort of virtual environment developers, kind of undiscovered talent, to develop virtual reality scenes for other indie artists to perform in. And then we match these people up, these indie musicians and these up and coming VR developers, and we give the VR developers a little bit of money, and they make kind of like a music video for a live performance of a independent kind of underground musician. And then every month or every couple of months or every 3 months, we're shrinking down the space in between them. I hope to start doing these shows every month, or at least every other month next year. And that's obviously a lot of work for me, and it's a new area to explore for me. I'm working on upgrading my live streaming that I'm doing every week, because that's been a successful form of kind of outreach from my sort of pigeonholed area of music, to reach out to a broader sort of set of musicians and invite them to come on the show, and to kind of introduce my sort of cult following to some other artists that are outside of this tiny little vaporwave bubble, that sometimes we end up existing in, and not exploring other avenues. And I'm just starting today. I'm kind of interested in blockchain and these kind of opportunities to put limited art on the blockchain, and how that kind of can integrate with my whole vision for this sort of virtual reality future that I'm building for my 100% Electronica record label. I'm doing such a bad job of explaining what I'm talking about. So, but if that's true, you've probably already turned this off. But thank you for listening. I've got one more question. Question number 10. Many people label your work as Vaporwave and Chillwave. How, in your own words, would you describe your sound? Yes. I I describe my sound as vaporwave because it's the easiest thing. But truly, I don't because definitions don't update as fast as perhaps the art develops. Um, a lot of people disagree that my music is vaporwave, and okay, I understand where you're coming from with that. If Because there's very, very little in common with my music. My music is typically all originally composed, versus vaporwave is kind of famous for being sample based, and chillwave. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say it's not vaporwave, it's chillwave. Well, I don't have a, I don't really think that it's truly either one of those things. It's kind of a mix of a lot of different styles of music, and I think that pretentiously, I have to say, I think that it defies being defined in such specific terms. Um, but I like to define it in specific terms so as to not be one of those pretentious guys that goes, "Oh, it can't be defined. It's all of these different things." But like I said earlier, I'm pulling from a lot of different influences. Basically, it's just I have a playlist of my favorite songs called George Clanton's Favorite Songs on Spotify, and I think that my music is just kind of like take all of those songs and blend them up together. Like mixing all the flavors at the soda fountain machine, and then what you get is George Clanton. It's like a mixture of all kinds of different sounds. But because I'm exploring these kind of dead aesthetics and playing around with artificially warping my sound to make it sound old and manipulated and vibey and psychedelic, and we're doing this kind of psychedelic electronic music, I like to describe my music as vaporwave. And with that said, thank you so much for having me. I know that I went way over my time, and maybe someone should cut this down to only the good bits. Thanks again for watching. Bye bye.